It's Madison here. You're about to listen to a recording of a speech I presented on Martin Luther King Jr.'s actual birthday, January 15th, in Fort Wayne at Indiana Purdue University, about the legacy of Dr. King and where do we go from here. An acknowledgement that I want to make to a lady who is not here today. This, of course, many of you know, is Martin Luther King's actual birthday, January 15th. And I chose to get married 36 years ago on this date, in large part so I wouldn't forget the date. Method to my madness. But in the last 36 years, we've barely spent an anniversary together because of events like this. So I sort of find myself in the same predicament that President Barack Obama was in when he was in Denver, and it was his wedding anniversary. I just hope that I'm not as dull as he was in that debate. But to my wife, who is not here, and I would tell you men, you might want to take notes, as I told her before I left, that if I should die and go to heaven, and St. Peter is fortunate enough to allow me, Reverend, to enter into the gates of heaven, I would have to pause and ask if my wife Sherry is there. Because if she's not, it cannot be heaven for me. And I'll just wait here on the steps until she gets here. Now, I know you brothers will probably take notes, you'll probably remember that, and you'll probably repeat it without getting me a damn worth of credit for it. You won't say, you know, Brother Madison said, and you will push that as if it was your own idea. I'm just saying, but if you're here with your special lady, remember, she's here and she heard it first from me. So, and then Brother Man here points to his wife there. I am glad to be here. It's almost like home. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. We used to come to Fort Wayne to go roller skating. And that's when gasoline was like 90 cents a gallon. We'd throw our little quarters together and try to make it 2 hours from Dayton and then hope we didn't spend more of our money so we could have money in the gas tank to get back. And so I'm very pleased to be here. I'm not quite certain what the chocolate hour is supposed to be all about. Someone today asked if white folks could come to the chocolate hour. And if you like chocolate, hell, you can come to the chocolate hour. I like vanilla ice cream, so if y'all decide to have a vanilla hour, please invite me. I'll be at the vanilla hour. Let me also point out something about how special this year is. Come Monday, the 21st, the official holiday of Martin Luther King Jr., there are several things that are transacting, that are crossing each other. First of all, 2013, we are celebrating the 150th anniversary of the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. And you know that it did not free a single slave because it was directed towards the rebel states, and that it was more of a military declaration than anything because it was needed, Lincoln needed, because of the way the Civil War was going, he needed more men to fight in the Civil War. But it was, as Frederick Douglass said, a beginning. It was a beginning. We also are looking at the 50th anniversary of when George Wallace stood in the door of the University of Alabama to block 2 African-American students from admission. I believe James Hood was one and Vivian Malone was the other. And many people don't realize that the reason Vivian Malone wanted to go to the University of Alabama was not for the purpose of strictly integrating the University of Alabama, but she wanted a class that was not offered at the Alabama State. It was only offered at the University of Alabama. And so she went there for the purpose of it continuing her education, and she felt, as her parents felt, that she had a right as a citizen of the state of Alabama to, in fact, enroll in that school. Her baby sister is Sharon Malone. Her baby sister is Sharon Malone, who was only 5 years old at the time that George Wallace stood in the door of the University of Alabama. Sharon Malone is now married to the first black U.S. Attorney General, Eric Holder. It's amazing when you think about that connection. And here she is now, old enough to not only remember, and I did an interview with Sharon Malone, who was 5 years old, and George Wallace's daughter, who was a teenager at the time that this incident took place. Sharon Malone told me in the interview that the mother, the father, the entire family had no idea what was going to happen. They weren't even allowed to go to the University of Alabama with their daughter. Imagine that. Here's your daughter getting ready to walk into hell on this campus. You don't know if there's going to be a riot. You don't know what's going to happen. And the U.S. Marshals tell her, the reason you can't go is because we don't have enough marshals to protect you. And so they had to actually sit at home and wait for the news to find out what happened. I talked with George Wallace's daughter, who said, and I asked her, well, what was it like that evening at dinner? And she said, we didn't even talk about it. We didn't even talk about it. I went out with some of my friends, didn't mention it. It was just another day in the Wallace household. Never mentioned it. 50 years ago, 1963, John F. Kennedy gave a major speech on civil rights. First time a modern-day president had done such. Less than 12 hours later, Medgar Evers was shot in his driveway while his children and wife, Myrlie Evers, watched. And here we are 50 years later, and Myrlie Evers will stand on the steps of the Capitol and be the first woman and non-clergy to deliver the invocation to the first black man elected president of the United States. "50 years ago, the March on Washington. We're prepared to celebrate the March on Washington. And 50 years ago, weeks after the March on Washington, 4 little girls were killed at the 16th Street Baptist Church as they prepared to worship. All of that in 1 year. And so what I want to do is sort of put Dr. King's life in perspective. Now let me read a rather humorous letter that my daughter sent to me her first year in college. And I think this institution can appreciate it. She went off to college. She was a freshman, in state, only a few miles from home, but she insisted that she had to live on campus because she wanted the college experience. That would be like living down the street and you went to a dorm to have that college experience. So we hadn't heard from her for an entire semester. She didn't text, she didn't call, not one single letter or any communication until the end of the semester, and I get this letter. Dear Dad, since I left for college, I've been remiss in writing, and I'm sorry for my thoughtlessness in not having written before. I will bring you up to date, but before you read on, please sit down. You're not to read any further unless you're sitting down, okay, Dad? Well then, Dad, I'm getting along pretty well now. The skull fracture and concussion I got when I jumped out the window of my dormitory when it caught fire shortly after my arrival here is pretty well healed now. I only spent 2 weeks in the hospital, and now I can see almost normally. And I only get headaches once a day. Fortunately, an attendant at a gas station near the dorm witnessed my jump, and he was the one who called the fire department and ambulance. He also visited me in the hospital every day. And since I had no place to live because of the burned dormitory, he was kind enough to invite me to share his apartment with him. It is really a basement room. It's kind of cute. He's a fine boy, and we've fallen deeply in love and are planning to get married. We haven't gotten an exact date yet, but it will be before my pregnancy begins to show. Yes, Daddy, I am pregnant. I know how much you're looking forward to being a grandfather and will welcome the baby and give it the same love, devotion, and tender care you gave me when I was a child. The reason for the delay in our marriage is that my boyfriend has a minor infection which prevents us from passing our premarital blood test, and I carelessly caught it from him. I know you will welcome him into our family with open arms. He is kind, and although not well educated, he's ambitious. And although he is of different race and religion than ours, I know your often expressed tolerance will not permit you to be bothered by that. Now that I've brought you up to date, I want to tell you, there was no dormitory fire. I did not have a concussion or skull fracture. I was not in the hospital. I am not pregnant. I am not engaged. I am not infected, and there is no boyfriend. However, I'm getting a D in American history and an F in chemistry, and I just wanted you to see those grades in their proper perspective. Your loving daughter. And so what I've been charged with is to have you see Martin Luther King in his proper perspective. Back with more of the speech on Dr. King's birthday next.
The NHL is back, and you can hear complete coverage of the 2013 season on Sirius XM.
The Los Angeles Kings have won the Stanley Cup.
Nash is open, score! Tic-tac-toe! What a goal!
Alex Ovechkin with a bullet from outside.
Hear NHL games on your existing radio, smartphone, or computer. Visit SiriusXM.com/all access or call 877-978-7332. Now available on all Sirius radios or in Canada.
The long wait is over.
My husband died 4 months ago. It was the hardest thing I've ever gone through, but he made it easier for me to celebrate his life and mourn my loss because he used After Steps. So I had instant access to his insurance policies, investment accounts, and his password to our online banking. It made it so I could function. It was one of the kindest things he ever did for me. After Steps is an amazing, easy service that will help you protect your family for tomorrow by preparing today. It's simple, easy, and will save your loved ones months of heartaches, headaches, and expenses. And right now, you can try After Steps for free.
Call After Steps right now for a free 14-day trial. It's easy. Just dial 1-800-686-1080. That's 1-800-686-1080. The call is free, and so is After Steps during the special 14-day free trial. Don't wait for tomorrow to come. Call After Steps today. Call 1-800-686-1080. That's 1-800-686-1080. 1080.
From his celebrated conversations with world figures to his work to inspire the next generation of leaders, broadcaster and advocate Tavis Smiley is an outstanding voice for change. Smiley has been honored by Time magazine as one of the world's most 100 influential people.
Anyone who is successful in any field of human endeavor will admit to you, if they're being honest, that they learn more from their failures than from their successes.
Listen to Tavis Smiley's show Saturdays at 7 p.m. East, 4 p.m. West on The Power, Sirius XM 128.
It's Madison here. You're about to listen to a recording of a speech I presented on Martin Luther King Jr.'s actual birthday, January 15th, in Fort Wayne at Indiana Purdue University, about the legacy of Dr. King and where do we go from here. Martin Luther King was very fond of saying, "Whenever I feel strongly about an issue, but fear the idea of speaking out." Martin Luther King, fear the idea of speaking out. I think of the words of King, and he said, in the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. That's what Martin Luther King, and to put it in perspective, and let me explain this. First of all, let's understand, Martin Luther King was probably one of the most hated men at the time he died. He was not even listed among the top 10 most admired men in 1968. There was a Baptist minister who so disliked Martin Luther King that he actually moved the entrance of his church in Chicago from the front to the side because he would never have on his stationery Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. Think about it. You go marching in Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee. You can't call the minister for prayer in the backwoods of those towns because the pastor might be a chaplain for the Klan. You can't call the sheriff because the sheriff might be a sergeant of arms of the Klan. There's nobody that you can call on. And you have to also remember, Dr. King never led a successful march in Atlanta, his hometown, until his funeral. Never led it. Most folk didn't even accept Dr. King until he was recognized with the Nobel Peace Prize. And when he got the Nobel Peace Prize, there was only one publication that sent a photographer for him to witness the reception of that Peace Prize, and that was Johnson Publication. If it had not been for Ebony Magazine and Jet Magazine, there would not have been in a single American publication, magazine, newspaper, or otherwise, that even bothered to go to see that award presented. Yes. Martin Luther King, when he was, as a graduate of Morehouse, there was actually a debate as to whether or not to revoke his degree because of his involvement in civil rights. There was a debate among many of the institutions that he was a member of as to whether or not we should accept or maintain his membership. So you have to ask yourself, what Martin Luther King are we going to talk about? The one that is the benevolent, middle of the road, kumbaya, we all have to get along, who understood that the real meaning of integration, let's put it in perspective, is not the mixing of colors. Your university does not integrate black and white and brown and Hispanic as if children sitting next and students sitting next to each other are going to learn through osmosis. What did you integrate? What do you integrate? You integrate what they segregate. What do they segregate? They segregate power. They segregate resources. They segregate responsibility. Look at the Little Rock Nine. Dr. King attended the graduation of Ernie Green, good friend of our show, good friend. If there ever was a hero that I had, it would have been Ernie Green in my mind as a young person. Why? Because at the time I was a young child, something caught my attention of what is it that how brave can you be as a high school student to walk through that gauntlet of people? Remember the young lady who wore the white dress, and you see that image, and many of you, if you look at that image now, and you young people, if you're not familiar with the image, you can Google it, and you all know how to Google better than I do. So you Google it, and you'll see it, and she said that dress was so full of spit that when she got home, she could wring it out. So what were they integrating? Well, the black school didn't have a library. The black school didn't have a chemistry lab. The black school didn't have a football field. The black school didn't have a gymnasium. The black school did not have any of those. The principal made less than the teachers at the white school. They integrated resources, they integrated power, and they integrated responsibility. So when you talk about diversity, what you're really talking about is the power, the resources, and the responsibility. That's what you're integrating. So you can live where you want to. You can teach wherever you want to. It's who has the power, the resources, and the responsibility. Let me move on with why it so upsets me. On my show the other day, Larry Ward, you may have seen his name. Larry Ward is the chairman of Gun Appreciation Day, and he appeared on CNN just this past Friday to defend a nationwide gun rally, which is scheduled for 2 days before the inauguration, 2 days before Martin Luther King. This sucker gets on, and I'm about ready to get real now. This sucker gets on CNN and says that we're looking for a peaceful protest. And I quote, "I think Martin Luther King Jr. would agree with me if he were alive today that if African Americans had been given the right to vote, the right to keep and bear arms from day one of the country's founding, perhaps slavery might not have been a chapter in our history." First of all, slavery and rights is something called an oxymoron. Secondly, I mean, what right does a slave have? As if we got off the Mayflower. And then you sit back and you think, now he has co-opted. Martin Luther King Jr. would agree with me? Martin Luther King Jr., whose house was bombed during the Montgomery bus boycott, and when the black men in the community said, we're going to get our guns, Martin said, keep your guns at home. That's what they want you to do. Martin Luther King, who was shot with a bullet from a rifle on the balcony of a hotel, would agree with you about having guns. Martin Luther King Jr., whose mother was shot playing the organ in church, and you adopt Martin Luther King Jr. for a gun day? And then we have this James Yeager, CEO of Tactical Response, who recently said he's going to start killing people. You may have seen him on TV. He said number one priority is from our department is to secure public safety, and he goes on and on and on, and he gets into this whole thing. It is laced with all kind of profanity. Ladies and gentlemen, he places it on YouTube, and he starts talking about get your gun, clean out your mags, pack a little food in your backpack, and if anybody comes for my gun right now, and I'm telling you right now, I'm going to start shooting people. He didn't say I'm going to start shooting feds. He didn't say I'm going to start shooting policemen. He didn't say I'm going to start shooting alcohol, firearm, tobacco agents. I'm going to start shooting people. Well, I look in the mirror, I'm people. I look out here, you people. So that could be anyone, and he's got a concealed weapon permit. And so on my show, we said, wait a minute. I want all of y'all. Here's the phone number to the Homeland Security. This is a domestic terrorist. Pick up the phone and call and tell them right now, take his license. Right now, investigate him. You do that right now. And let me tell you something. Within a matter of 2 hours, they got over 2,000 phone calls from our listeners. They went down there on Friday night. On Friday night, you should know. And those of you who are listening and made that phone call that are in this room, let me tell you, took his concealed weapon permit, and I would imagine to date he is under investigation. That's why I say, when all the talking is done, you really have to ask yourself, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? And many of you know I've got this thing going with Ted Nugent. Ted Nugent, April 17, 2012, big bad Ted Nugent, who pooped in his pants, didn't change his, you laugh, the Vietnam War, got drafted, or didn't want to get drafted, didn't bathe for 30 days, pooped, urinated in his pants, walked around like that, so that when he went to the draft board, they'd think he was crazy, and they wouldn't draft him. Now, when he had a chance to play with any gun that the United States military could give him, he didn't want to play with guns in the real war. So he wants to get out here on his ranch and shoot anything that he can purchase and buy. And so Ted Nugent gets all big and bad and says right there, you heard him. He said right there, if President Barack Obama gets reelected, he said, I will either be in jail or dead. Well, Mr. Nugent, you have some 92 days to keep your promise. And I personally don't give a damn which one it is. I am saying to you, why do we, and so understand the power. And we do a Ted Nugent countdown. He was the one that said he'd be in dead or he'd be in jail or dead. I didn't say it. He said it. He said it publicly. He made that threat. He made that threat against the president, and you know who he was talking about, of the United States. So ask yourself this question. If Dr. King was alive today, what would he say? Somebody asked me to put together a piece, and I wrote this. And you're hearing it for the first time. And I wrote it in the form of as if Dr. King was speaking. Hello, I'm the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. You may have heard of me. Husband of Coretta Scott King, father of 4 beautiful children, pastor, civil rights leader, and Nobel Peace Prize recipient. Unfortunately, I didn't live a long life, but I tried to live a committed life. 50 years ago, we were engaged in a struggle to alleviate structural racism. In my day, children in Birmingham, Alabama were demonstrating against racial segregation only to be met with fire hoses, snarling dogs, and even death. 50 years ago, 4 beautiful innocent girls were murdered in a church by a bomb while they attended Sunday school. A young field director of the Mississippi NAACP seeking to secure the rights to vote was murdered in the driveway of his home. The governor of Alabama actually stood in the doorway of a state university and refused 2 black students the right to enroll. We also had a successful televised march on Washington, D.C. in support of jobs and justice. You may have heard my speech where I used the metaphor, I have a dream, to inspire a nation to support the civil rights movement. We also had a young president of the United States, John F. Kennedy, who had promised us a civil rights bill, but unfortunately, he was assassinated that same year in Dallas, Texas, before the law could become a reality. Now, 50 years later, black and white citizens of Birmingham, Alabama, and other cities have profoundly shaken the entire edifices of de jure segregation into a relic of the past. The state of Mississippi has more black elected officials than any other state in the country. The baby sister of Vivian Malone, who was one of the 2 black students refused admission to the University of Alabama, is a medical doctor and married to the United States Attorney General, who is an African American, appointed by an African American president of the United States. Myrlie Everett Williams, the widow of Medgar Evers, is going to deliver the invocation at the 2nd inauguration of the first elected and re-elected president of the United States, Barack Obama, on my birthday, which is now a national holiday. In short, we've gone from a nation that always called us boy to now a black man having to be addressed as Mr. President. So I'm being asked, what do I think of my country and the progress of black Americans and the world in general? I'm pleased that the civil rights movement of the 20th century has yielded commendable results. I'm especially proud that black and white Americans continue the struggle to knock down barriers to opportunities, ensuring all, no matter what their race or gender, all have the opportunity to reach the pinnacle in every facet of our society. There appears to be no limit out of reach of black Americans. There is a course, this is a course manifested by the election and re-election of President Barack Obama.
We make it, for we see it, you take it. Oh, make me wanna holler the way they do.
From the Black Eagle, coming up.
From SiriusXM's Blue Collar Radio, Bill Info, Off the Cuff.
Here's your sign.
A show all about having fun, being funny, and all things blue collar.
I got to actually be really good friends with Clyde Wright. He threw a no-hitter with the Angels. First time I met him, he goes, how many no-hitters do you think Nolan, Ryan, and I have together? And I go, God, I don't know. He goes, 8. He goes, he's got 7, I got 1.
Tune us in. I think you'll have a good time. It's called Off the Cuff Radio. Monday at 2 p.m. East, 11 West.
Check it out on Blue Collar Radio, Sirius XM 97. Earn it on.
At Verizon, we believe in the power of technology to solve just about anything. It's why we wake up every day and ask ourselves one single question. What do we want to build next? So we're employing some of the sharpest minds to tackle the world's toughest challenges. We're tirelessly working to flip the equation on energy conservation, healthcare, public safety, and education. Because the world's biggest challenges deserve even bigger solutions. Powerful answers. Verizon.
Hey everybody, this is Stephen Baldwin, the actor. I've been making movies in Hollywood for 25 years and done all I can to make my teeth look their best. I've tried a lot of products because I drink coffee and tea, and that stuff stains your teeth. And I don't really like using those whitening strips or trays because my teeth can get a little sensitive. Plus, those things take like an hour to work. Here is the solution to yellow stained teeth. It's called Power Swabs, and it's the only whitening system that uses a tooth detergent to remove the stains off your teeth so that they stay whiter longer. And the best part of Power power swabs is they work after 5 minutes. You just swab your teeth for about 2 minutes, and coffee and tea and smoking stains start to disappear. And unlike normal bleach whiteners, power swabs works on natural teeth as well as bonding, veneers, caps, and crowns. Try power swabs risk-free by dialing 1-800-210-7316. Clinically proven to whiten teeth in less than 5 minutes. Call today to learn how you can save 50% off the retail price. 1-800-210-7316.
Schneider National's Drive to Dega sweepstakes is back. 3 lucky winners will head to the race May 3rd through the 5th for the ultimate Talladega experience. You get to pick your prize, take a pre-race pace car ride, or wave the green flag for qualifying. Each prize package also includes 4 premium box seat tickets, a 2-night hotel stay, and a $2,000 gift card. To enter, go to schneiderjobs.com/Dega. That's schneiderjobs.com/Dega. We'll see you in the winner's circle. Prizes may be subject to change.
What is a Lewisism?
A Lewisism? Who done heard of that term?
A tip from Lou Hutt, and it's essential you get it.
If you want to build, transform a hobby to a $5 million business, begin with the end in mind. That's right. If that's the goal, begin with the end in mind.
Listen to Lou Hutt for more tips Saturdays at 9 a.m. Eastern on The Power, Sirius XM 128.
It's Madison here. You're about to listen to a recording of a speech I presented on Martin Luther King Jr.'s actual birthday, January 15th, in Fort Wayne at Indiana Purdue University, about the legacy of Dr. King and where do we go from here.
In a little tent.
There appears to be no limit out of reach of black Americans. This is a course manifested by the election and re-election of President Barack Obama. However, the ugly legacy of racism still exists. 50 years later, it appears all types of conniving methods are still used to keep black citizens from registering to vote. There remains a system of white supremacy that attempts to dominate the power structure of our society. The issue of poverty still appears to plague the United States. I'm disappointed that the rate of unemployment of black people in 2013 is nearly double that of the rate of U.S. citizens in total. My heart is heavy to hear that over 1 in 4 black Americans are living on an island of poverty, to see our prisons exploding in disproportionate numbers with black and brown young men and women is sad. It is unconscionable to find political leaders defunding the public school system. I'm still fearful that if humankind has a right to survive, we must find an alternative to war and destruction. It is true today, as it was 50 years ago. The choice is no longer between violence and nonviolence. It is either nonviolence and non-existence. I'm amazed that many Americans still don't realize that we're all interconnected. The unemployed, poverty-stricken white person needs to understand that they are in the same boat with their black and brown brothers and sisters, that we must develop federal programs for public works, retraining, and jobs for all. Finally, what I think is that we've come a long way in a relatively short amount of time. However, as it was 50 years ago, there is still too much complacency and too many who consider that they are above the struggles of their fellow human beings who have less. Even though our president is an African American, we still must take direct action without waiting for the government to act, or a majority to agree, or a court to rule in our favor. I'm humbled that President Barack Obama will take the oath oath of office with his hands on my personal Bible. However, Mr. President, be mindful as you place your hands upon that Bible, it is more than a symbolic gesture. I gave on Christmas Eve at Ebenezer Baptist Church in 1967 the following sermon. Every man and woman is a child of God, made in his image, and therefore must be respected as such. I still have a dream that one day the idle industries of Appalachia will be revitalized, and the empty stomachs of Mississippi children will be filled, and brotherhood will be more than a few words at the end of a prayer, but rather the first order of business of every legislative agenda. I still have a dream today that war will come to an end, that nations will no longer rise up against nations, neither will they study war anymore. I think that that's how Martin Luther King would see the United States of America in 2013. A. Philip Randolph in the March on Washington said the following: look for the enemies of Medicare, of higher minimum wages, of Social Security, of federal aid to education, and there you will find the enemy of the Negro, the coalition of Dixiecrats, and the reactionary Republicans that seek to dominate Congress. 50 years ago. 50 years ago. And we have this constant argument. Conservatives blame us on a lack of family values, while liberals too often blame a lack of government programs. Reality is, neither side is seeing the whole picture. It's a combination of both. Look at the country. Understand what happened in Arizona when the congresswoman was shot. Pause for a moment. Go back to that day. A white Catholic male Republican judge was murdered on his way to greet a Democratic Jewish woman, member of Congress, who was his friend. Her life was saved initially by a 20-year-old Mexican-American gay college student, and eventually by a Korean-American combat surgeon. And all that were killed were eulogized by an African-American president. Yes. So I want to point out that this is not a day off. It's a day on to recommit yourself to some cause. Young people, stop looking at moments as if they are movements. The difference is movements require sacrifice. Yes. Look at the people here who are old enough to be your parents, grandparents. They were involved. Talk to them about the movement, not the moment, the movement, and what they sacrificed. Some sacrificed their lives. Some sacrificed their college education. Can you imagine? Julian Bond, good friend of mine, decides his father, many of you know his father, Horace Mann Bond, was president of a university. He gets involved in the civil rights movement, one of the organizers of SNCC. Can you imagine walking into the house and telling your father, the Dr. Horace Mann Bond, president of the Lincoln University, Pop, I'm going to drop out of school. But Julian, it's your senior year. I'm going to drop out of school and get involved in the civil rights movement. Can you imagine being a white student from New York, Detroit? You're at an Ivy League school, you're at the University of Michigan, you're at Indiana, and you could say, no, I'm not coming home this summer. I'm going to Sunflower County, Mississippi, and register people, black folk, to vote. Oh, wait a minute, isn't that where they just killed some college students who, isn't that where they just killed Viola Louise? Isn't that, what are you talking about? Sacrifice. The difference between a moment and a movement. And so the question is, what is your movement? What are the causes today? Well, less than 50% of young black men graduate from high school in the United States, 2005, 2006, according to a new report. Dropping out of high schools, as you know, sentences young men to illicit drug sales and all kinds of major problems. As you know, a third of high school graduates, along with 42% of college graduates, never read a book after they finish school. 83% of the families in the United States. Do you realize 83% of the families in the United States didn't buy a book last year? Didn't buy a book. 42 million American adults, 20% who hold high school diplomas, cannot read. 50 million read at a 4th grade level. There are all kinds of issues to get involved with. And so the solution is that we have to look at this 21st century, that there really are only two kinds of people, not black or white, rich or poor, foreign or national. There's two kinds of people in the world today. Those who are educated and those who are not. And let me tell you, education has become the new currency of the 21st century. Education it is not gold, it's not marks, it's not yens, it's not platinum. They can print all the freaking platinum coins they want to. Education is the new currency. You go to China right now, millions of people without education hop on trains, boats, anything that floats to get to jobs that pay pennies on the dollar and work all year long so that they can have money to send their kids to college and insist that their children not end up their way. And let me tell you something, those without education, don't you think that the barrier is going to be the Rio Grande? Don't you think the barrier is going to be the Mediterranean Sea? There will be no barrier, because people who don't have education will travel wherever they have to go to find minimum wage jobs, and they will be exploited. Look, you take the southern border of the United States. People who live in Mexico who have education aren't sneaking across the border. They're not the ones coming across the border. It's the people who don't have the education, who are seeking a better life. And so understand, you have opportunities for movements, and education may be a clear one. We as black people, I mean, we're like number one in almost everything, from diabetes to heart failure. The First Lady, she talks about the importance of obesity in childhood. These are issues, these are movements that we can be involved in. We spend money. I mean, it's absolutely amazing when I look at the kind of money that African Americans spend. Now get this, the buying power. Do you know the buying power of African Americans right now is $1 trillion annually? If we were a nation, we'd be the 16th largest nation on the planet. 23.9 million African Americans use the internet. 33% own smartphones. More than of African Americans, more than the double amount of mobile phone voice minutes they use compared to whites. Matter of fact, they say it's 1,000 298 minutes a month versus white folks who use it 606 minutes a month. And what do we talk about? The percentage of African Americans attending college or earning a degree has increased to 44% of men, 53% of women. But we're not spending that money or investing it with each other. So here's my solution. It's not enough to have an educated child. We've got to have an educated community. We must have educated families. Every black man, woman, and child must become part of a community of learners. Black Americans must take education, I tell you, out of the schools. The university, take it out of the university. Take it out there into the community. Root it in the homes, root it in the workplace, the churches, the streets. You got to have essential skills. The ability to read, understand, convey ideas in writing, speak to others so that you can be understood, observe critically, listen actively, use math to solve problems, use information in the communication technology that's around, reflect, evaluate, learn through research. And there's not much time. There's not much time. Because with globalization and the speed that it is happening, black Americans have entered the educate or die era. The educate or die era. And there's only two questions. Will we change? And can we survive? So as I get to my closing, understand what Dr. King was really about. And I think he would agree with this. Greatness is not determined by your title. Greatness is determined by your function. There were a lot of black men who were preachers, had PhDs. The four who sat in North Carolina, the four students that started the sit-in movement, all of them were freshmen. They weren't professors. They weren't graduate students. They were all freshmen. Started a movement. All of them got kicked out of school. Got kicked out of a historically black school. Got kicked out. Greatness is not determined by your title, but by your function. You got it. Three types of people in this world. Those who watch things happen, those who make things happen, and those who say, what the hell just happened? What Dr. King's life reminded us is that we have to be more than a thermometer. A thermometer does what? Measures the temperature. As we think of King and celebrate this holiday, we've got to commit ourselves to be thermostats. Like that thermostat in my Holiday Inn room. I got to keep sitting it. Sometimes it's cold. Sometimes it's a little too hot. I've got to set the temperature. You've got to set the temperature in your community. Are you a thermometer or are you a thermostat? And the King life in its proper perspective, his whole life reminds us that service is more important than success. That people are more important than possessions. And that principle is more important than power. Now I'll go to church on you. Put a basketball in my hands. I might be worth $19. Put a basketball in Michael Jordan's hands and it's worth championship. Put a baseball in my hands, maybe it's worth about $6. You put a baseball in the hands of a major league player and it's worth millions of dollars. You put a tennis racket in my hands, it's useless. You put a tennis racket in the hands of Venus Williams and you've got a championship. It depends on whose hands it's in. You put a rod in my hands, it'll keep away a wild animal. You put a rod in the hands of Moses, and you can part the mighty sea. It depends on whose hands it's in. You put a slingshot in my hands, it's nothing but a kid's toy. You put a slingshot in the hands of David, and it becomes a mighty weapon. You put 2 fishes and 5 loaves of bread in my hands, I might make you a couple of fish sandwiches. You put 2 fishes and 5 loaves of bread in God's hands, and you feed thousands. It depends on whose hands it's in. You put nails and wood in my hands, I'll build you a birdhouse. You put nails in the hands of Jesus Christ, and you bring salvation to the entire world. I've stopped by to tell you that it's in your hands. God bless you.
It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come.